again, we'll do a quick roll call to see who is with us today. Councilwoman Monica Peters, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Greg Ferguson, are you with us? Okay. Jerron, are you with us remotely?
Jerron here.
Melanie Burnett, are you with us, Melanie?
Yes, I'm here.
Patrick Chapin.
He had said he may try to get on there. They're doing some filming over at their new building.
Okay. Ray Gibbs?
Here.
Tom Conley?
Here.
And Jessica Nguyen?
Here.
All right. We'll check back for Greg and Patrick a little later. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from November 23rd. Are there any changes or updates or amendments to those minutes?
Jerron Hollis, a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes. Today, the primary item on the agenda today is a presentation by 505 Design. This is the marketing firm that is working with the Market Authority, and they are doing a presentation for us based on the campaign that they've been working on with the Market Authority. Tom, if you want to introduce them, if that's
Sure.
okay, if you
I
want to get some lead in.
assume that they're on and maybe they can share their screen.
Yes, Tom. There we go.
For those listening, could you introduce yourself? Share your name for those who may be listening to the broadcast.
Kevin, we don't have a screen yet. Okay, there it is.
You got it? All right. I guess we are in business.
I see your screen, Kevin, but we don't see the presentation.
We see a nice sunset.
Oh, I switched screens.
So while we're pulling up the presentation, could 505, could you guys all introduce yourselves and
Sure.
tell a little bit about who you are and your firm?
I'm Jim Babinchak, partner with 505 Design. And we've got Kevin Kern, who's our discipline lead with branding and identity. And then Kelly Kleinfelter. She's also a graphic designer with our group. And then Taylor Compton.
Hello.
She's an architect and has also been working with the High Point market.
Yes, thank you. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so this is Kevin Kern. We thank you all for your time today. As was mentioned, we've been working with Tom and his team with the High Point Market Authority for the past few months, helping to develop an overall vision and narrative for the market. It's been a fun project so far. We actually have a meeting tomorrow, so hopefully I feel that they've found that it's been going well so far as well. So we're just going to flip through here a little bit, tell you a little bit about ourselves today, who we are and what we do. We are thinkers, listeners, observers, curiosity seekers, collaborators, and designers. So 505 Design, we are a collection of multidisciplinary designers offering the following services that you see on your screen. We do project visioning, project branding and identity, master planning, architecture, interior design, urban interiors, streets and streetscapes, and environmental graphics and signage design. Sounds like a lot of things, but it pretty much comes down to three professions. We hire architects, interior designers, and graphic designers, are primary professions, all under one roof, collaborating together.
One thing I wanted to add is that we do have three offices, one in Charlotte, Boulder, and San Francisco. The four of us all come out of the Charlotte office.
Yes, that's a good point. Thanks, Jim. So we like to think that we approach our projects and our work a little differently. We really try to get to the essence or the story of a project, whether it's a branding project, an architectural project, interiors, or graphic design. So we've kind of created this little description here. We pursue stories that emotionally resonate with people and embody their aspirations. These stories and our ability to translate that narrative create meaningful experiences that differentiate our clients' brands. As I mentioned, we really try to get into the story, the true essence and meaning of the task at hand, whether it's a built environment or creating a brand and identity. We're going to tell you a little bit about our process and how we work. And we've got a few examples here as well that kind of help define this process. So I don't want this to be all about me speaking. So we're going to kind of tag team here a little bit. I'm going to ask Kelly to kind of dive in a little bit. I'll do the clicking. Kelly, you can just motion for when I've been on the screen too long.
So this is an overview of what our process is. We're going to dive in a little bit deeper about each step. The first being listen and observe. It's very similar to what we're doing here today. We sit down with you and we listen to you about the brand and what you envision the brand being. What about your brand is the story behind it, similar to what Kevin mentioned. We take time to observe the environment, and then we go into research about the precedent history and the culture, competitors, and the context that surrounds your brand. Because ultimately, nobody knows your brand better than you do. The second part is our creative brief and process. So this is the next step. We take the information that we gained in the first step and we draft a creative brief. So basically what a creative brief is it's a short statement that's concise and aspirational, but basically telling the story about your brand, which is your why moving forward. So on the right-hand side, you can see a few screenshots of pages that were developed regarding the brand of the town of Fort Mill, which is our case study that you'll see as we move through the process on the next page. So our third step is vision and ideation. This is where everything that we learned and gained in steps 1 and 2, this is where it becomes visual. So this is where we start developing the logo identity, your logo mark, taking all that information we learned and sketching out different variations and options of what your future brand will look like. So here on the right, you can see some sketches that were done for the town of Fort Mill. And then on the bottom there in blue is the final logo that was approved by the town of Fort Mill. And step number 4 is implementation and action. This is where your brand comes to life. This is how we translate the brand into the environment, whether it's through wayfinding, environmental graphics, signage, interpretive elements. Again, this is where your brand and identity and logo mark come into the environment. So as you can see on the right-hand side, the Fort Mill logo was placed on their water tower, their service vehicles, and ultimately apparel that's used throughout the town of Fort Mill.
All right, thank you, Kelly. So ultimately, as was mentioned, as we started off here, what brings us here today, and it's been our progress so far with the High Point Market Authority. So we've been working together since this fall to develop a strategy to enhance the overall market experience. And what we've done to date, we attended market this past fall. We met with numerous exhibitors and really kind of, got their, what am I going to say? Their kind of impression of market and what they've been observing over the years, which was very beneficial in getting that insider feedback and knowledge. And what we've done after that and since then is really kind of dived into what market is and ultimately what it can be, and developed a design brief and guiding principles. And Taylor has been extremely instrumental in all the work that we've done to date. As Jim may have mentioned, Taylor's an architect here in our firm, but she wears many hats, and she's very involved in visioning and developing narratives for our project. So I'm going to let her dive in here a little bit just to give a little preview of the work that we've done to date with the Market Authority.
Sure. You can go advance one slide.
One more? Okay.
Yeah, so we're kind of a peek behind the curtain, if you will, of our creative process. Kelly outlined the kind of overview steps. As Kevin mentioned, step one, listening and observing. We attended market, we met with exhibitors, we asked a lot of questions. We experienced the neighborhoods within market and really understood what makes each one of them special or what the potential is there. And then this was kind of our step two, which is, kind of sharing what we learned and unpacking all the information that we heard. We brought the High Point Market Authority team into our office to look at this. We kind of had a very hands-on approach to our process. And invited the Market Authority to participate in kind of helping us put this together and move things around. But this was sort of step two. You can advance. And as part of our process, we come up with a design brief, and the design brief really helps guide our process, and it's kind of serves as a gut check to make sure we're really focusing and honing in on things that really matter. So it's just kind of a few highlights. We recognize that High Point has a very unique heritage founded on furniture making and textile industry. However, that it's only celebrated twice a year during market. So we see that as a real opportunity. Our goal is to provide High Point with the tools to create a year-round design-centric resource and destination for design professionals and home furnishings industry, as well as design enthusiasts. High Point Market is unlike any other trade show in the world. I think it might have been the only trade show that happened in 2020 safely, because it was spread across the downtown. So we want to really own that. We are the home furnishings capital of the world. It's not a small title, but we also recognize that we have the potential to be the home of creativity, because there's also more beyond kind of the furnishings. So, we're going to move forward, embrace that legacy of the past, but kind of build on that momentum as we kind of go into the new vision for High Point Market. So just kind of touching on our guiding principles, which kind of breaks out some of what was in the design brief, but really celebrating and owning High Point Market. As I talked about, it's a global event across a small town, or it has a small town feel and spread across an entire city. So it's a very urban experience for a trade show. You're not in a Las Vegas showroom. We want to create a central hub of activity. When you are spread across the downtown, you lose that sense of center or core, that sense of arrival, epicenter. So kind of focusing on that and strengthening that hub. Identifying and defining the neighborhoods, making sure that they have a visible connection to the actual physical map that users are using to experience market, and then also to help highlight the personalities of each neighborhood, and then infuse year-round energy. How does, again, market beyond 2 weeks out of the year, how can it be enjoyed by everyone? A year-round destination, and hopefully market can be a catalyst for improvements throughout the city.
All right, thank you, Taylor. We're going to switch gears here a little bit and share with you some case studies of some work that we've done with other municipalities, primarily all regional here in the Carolinas, both North and South. Taking a look at some of the branded environments. This is an extension of a brand, our branding, into the physical environment, and how that can be represented to help create place and identity, and primarily places for people to gather. We like to think of a lot of our work that we do as creating these community living rooms, or I'll soon turn this over to you, Jim, as Jim likes to call it, the third place. It's that space and time between work and home where you choose to spend your elective time to be with the people that you love and want to be with, and doing what matters. So we like to create these special environments, and these are primarily focused on those within municipalities. So Jim, I'll kind of turn it over to you a little bit.
Sure.
We'll tag team here.
Thanks, Kevin. So we're going to share a few different case studies of different towns and cities in the Carolinas that we've worked with to show that branding goes, beyond just a logo or identity. And some of our clients, they've even actually called us vertical branders. So it's taking that brand, that essence, in instilling it in experiences and places that are memorable and within communities. And oftentimes these are parks. We worked with Rock Hill in South Carolina. There was a underutilized park at the end of Main Street. It was a public-private partnership with Comporium, which is the local broadband group, and then also the city of Rock Hill, where we kind of drew upon the essence of Rock Hill being a textile city. And you can kind of see the actual stage was built, inspired by the loom process in weaving, and then in the upper right, kind of the cotton ball graphic that's part of that overall texture that you see. And it definitely has more of a little bit of future forward feel, but combined with the historic fabric of downtown Rock Hill, it has a very timeless kind of overall aesthetic. And it really does become the community gathering room with food truck Fridays, yoga on Saturday, food markets. It really comes alive in non-pandemic times.
Exactly.
But you can go to the next one.
Yeah, I think one thing to note, you'll see here, we partner with a large majority of our projects with another design firm, Land Design, that they do landscape architecture and planning. So a lot of the work that you're going to see here has been in collaboration with them. It's a pretty solid partnership.
Thanks for bringing that up. And then also at Hickory, their downtown section called Union Square, which is about 3 blocks that front their historic downtown fabric, where they hold live events. And we created a new stage for that for the live events and food market, and becomes a kind of covered outdoor pavilion when it's not in use. Upgraded the restroom facilities, but kind of really built on the essence of Hickory being all about craftsmanship and artisan, and using kind of the overall hickory leaf icon and bringing that to the wayfinding elements, as you can see here in the bottom left, top right, portals, and making it very, very much integrated into the overall experience of Union Square.
Yep. And this work was just complete. Everything was pretty much wrapped up this past fall. So it was done, and it still hasn't quite been able to be utilized the way it's intended. Hopefully it will be sometime soon. I can speak a little bit of this one. We've been working with the town of Salisbury, right down the road 85 from you all, working to on a new park community gathering spot, Bell Tower Green. You see the master plan here. Land Design has done all the master planning. 505 has done all the verticals. So we have some interesting trellises. Everything's based on the circle motif within the plan itself. We also did the logo and branding for the park. That was done pretty early on. We also developed the barricade fencing and helped with their overall campaign as they launched this to the community. And then we've got some signage and interpretive sign panels within the park. All this has actually been fabricated and waiting for install. So this should be completed and open to the public this spring. So we're really looking forward to this opening. And again, this not unlike Fountain Park and Rock Hill. This park sits on the edge of Main Street, so it's definitely going to be a nice asset to the downtown, providing a place for community events and gatherings and concerts here on the green.
So some of you may be familiar with the Ramir Bearden Park in Uptown Charlotte, signature urban park. It's become Charlotte's kind of own Central Park, and it's actually adjacent to the Charlotte Knights AAA baseball team and their new stadium. And there's been a lot of new economic development all around the park as well. But it's it's based on the life of Ramir Bearden, who's an internationally known artist, born in Charlotte. There's a number of gardens that speak to different periods in his lifetime, and these pylons were created to kind of celebrate and mark those times, but also kind of give information and show some of his artwork at the base of the columns, and they become like an interesting wayfinding, almost sculptural art statement as well.
Yep. Downtown Kannapolis, Taylor was a very integral part of this. You want to
Sure.
talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, so actually Kannapolis, what was interesting is that it was privately owned up until recently. The city reacquired it. It was basically a dormant downtown, completely empty. And the city kind of got us on board to help kind of revision or revitalize the potential for the Main Street. It was really done through kind of two main efforts. One, adding a new minor league stadium, not unlike we did at High Point, or worked on at High Point, and also creating a linear park down the middle of Main Street, which just kind of acts as a catalyst to activate and kind of re-energize that Main Street and get businesses there again. So all along Main Street, there's these outdoor rooms where we have different kind of furniture, we did these cool custom swings with a interesting kind of custom pattern. And the goal is really just to bring people outside and create places to gather and hang out, and helps kind of create a program space before or after events, like at the ballpark or maybe restaurants or kind of other events in downtown. This project was recently completed last year. So it was a fun project.
And the High Point Rockers Ballpark, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. We wanted to include this. Kelly and I were the environmental graphic designers on this project, along with the project architect, Odell, here in Charlotte. It was a really fun project to work on. We really enjoyed it. And actually look forward to, having a full season again and being able to go. But, this, while this isn't necessarily an outdoor living room, like we were describing some of these projects, it certainly is, a place for, folks in the city of High Point to gather. And then lastly, we have another project that's a little more immersive, bringing all of our expertise together. And it's integrating the narrative into the built environment, more architecturally. And Jim has been the project manager on this. It has been living and breathing this for quite a few years now. And he can speak to this.
Sure. Another way to describe a narrative is like a project story. And we look for what's special and unique about a place. And actually, Kevin and I both live in Fort Mill and know the Clear Springs family really well, and have developed a number of projects within Fort Mill. But this one's very special because it's like we're designing our own third place. Since we live here and work outside Fort Mill, this is where we come to meet friends and family. And that whole area in the front there is a very walkable, pedestrian-oriented village. And since we're multidisciplinary, we have, like, I'm an architect, Taylor's an architect, Kevin and Kelly, graphic designers and signage and wayfinding. And then we have that strategic relationship with land design that brings planning and landscape architecture expertise. We're able to weave a very rich and engaging story throughout. And the whole legacy of Fort Mill is for 150 years. It's been a textile town. It used to be the Springs Company, and a lot of people who've been moving to Fort Mill aren't aware of that, and they come to Kingsley and they see through the signage and graphics and around the corner, and the spaces in between the buildings are just in the architectural expressions that kind of speak to that Fort Mill as that town. And actually, we actually have the memory panels here on the bottom right if you wanted to get really deep into the story. But you can kind of see how that story is kind of weaved into the signage and the graphics and the brickwork of the architecture and the color and the materiality with the wood and the architecture. So this is at a much grander scale than we were showing you before, but it's really become a part of Fort Mill's overall experience and brand.
Yeah, we actually back in the end of December, or I guess it was maybe early December, we're just awarded an award from the ICSC, which is the International Council of Shopping Centers, as the top mixed use property of last year. So we were pretty honored to receive that. But it was a really fun project. And what made it so special is that we had such a rich narrative and history to work with. So the content was there. We didn't have to dig too deep. So, it's a very rich story. And as Jim mentioned, we have an interpretive signage program where we tell the story and the legacy of Fort Mill and the Springs textile industry. so you get a little bit of fun, a little bit of education at the same time. And that pretty much concludes, what we had to share with you today. I hope we didn't overwhelm you or bore you with this, but we certainly appreciate your time, and we've thoroughly enjoyed working with the High Point team. We've been up to High Point several times throughout this process, and I think there's so many rich things within your town that are worthy of celebrating. Here we are living in Charlotte, and we always knew that the High Point market was a thing, but never realized just how huge and what the economic impact is on the state of North Carolina. I mean, it's you really have something special and something really worthy of hanging your hat on with the legacy and heritage that you've got within your town.
Well, 505 Design, we'd like to thank you for your presentation today. Before we open it up for any questions that you guys might have, I hope 505 is okay if you guys wouldn't mind answering a few questions if there are questions. Just going to circle back to see if Greg Ferguson has joined us. And Patrick Chapin, were you able to get on? Are there any other members of council that are participating remotely?
I'm here, Michael J. Wagner.
Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
thank you for joining us.
Mhm.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for 505 regarding their presentation that they would like to ask?
Mr. Chairman, this is Wesley Hudson. I'm president as well. I believe Tyrone Johnson is as well.
All right. Thank you guys for joining. Any questions anyone would have, like to have for 505 Design?
This is Ray Gibbs with Forward High Point. One of the things that, that's going to be important for us, as Tom and I have talked about early on, is we're actually kind of working on kind of that marketing image area for us, which is the rest of downtown outside of the market district. And so we've kind of been working through what they should be, neighborhoods, kind of the way it's done there. And right now, we've kind of identified 4 kind of distinct neighborhoods within downtown. And now it coming back is, how do we actually market and identify those, our catalyst area, what are we, how are we going to think of that area? Is it, because downtown when you talk about downtown for High Point, a lot of things come to mind, which I think, as you're seeing in the furniture district, is, how do we start identifying and making sure that we have, kind of downtown furniture district, downtown High Point for, the community, and we also have kind of area known as Uptown, which is actually one of the districts that we have. So I think it's going to be how do we kind of join these efforts together? How would you see us best working those together?
That's a tough one. I think a lot of it, depends on how these neighborhoods live and they're shared. One of the things that, we discovered with working with the Market Authority and the neighborhoods that have been defined within that is that they lived on a map. But how does that translate into the physical world? How do you know when you're in a neighborhood? What defines those neighborhoods? Is it a thing? Is it is it wayfinding program, which I think is probably part of it. It's really kind of thinking about, you can define districts or neighborhoods, but then you really have to think about the user experience and how people identify with those. both in the physical environment and in the print and promotional and maps as well.
I think one of the things, as you talked about, a community's living room in a third place, a lot for us, I think, is going to be trying to redevelop that, not only for folks when they're here for the market, but for the community ourselves, with the restaurants and the coffee shops and residential and office and retail mixed together, the cafe settings. We have a food hall under construction, the area around the ballpark being one, but then also up on Main Street. And then one of the other things, that I kind of saw, especially in Kingsley, is I think the architecture that you have really kind of pulls a lot of it together within kind of the architecture. One of the things for High Point is because the furniture showrooms have had a whole different reason for being. They've generally been individual buildings designed internally on the exterior, really to be a showplace and present yourselves. They really weren't designed for that street interaction from the pedestrian. And I think that's one of the things that we're kind of struggling with now, especially when we go down Main Street, is how do we reintroduce it from the automobile type design into that pedestrian friendly and making that edge less resistant, and I know Streetscape can do some of that. The uses will do a lot to it. I think that overall, kind of what I kind of wrote down, how do we interweave the built environment? So I think, that's one of the things I think is going to go a long way to our image. And, truthfully, we haven't done a real good job of that to date.
Absolutely. I was just going to chime in real quick. I think, and one of the things that we've been working through with the High Point Market Authority is the showrooms are kind of owned and operated by, by the different companies or manufacturers. But what we see as a real opportunity are the spaces between buildings, to really activate and put parklets or gathering spaces, and especially when we have that opportunity because it's spread across the whole downtown. There's more of those opportunities that are available. And I think, we were talking about creating a downtown outside of Market District. I think you're right on the money with, creating a third place. I think there's some really great restaurants we've gotten a chance to visit in High Point. But I think what's needed is kind of a density of things where people can, I think, what does Jim say? Fit, fat, fab.
Fam.
Yeah. So it's like if you have
For family.
those are his four words. And a lot of times that can apply more to like a retail kind of mixed use environment. But, if you have like food, you have a place for your family to gather, a place for your kids to play, you have an event or an activity you can do, it really becomes a destination where people drive from Greensboro or Raleigh and want to spend time and maybe stay in a hotel and to stay and kind of spend their elective time in a place. And I think that density is really what's needed, would really help make it feel like downtown. And I think a lot of what's going on with the synergy with the ballpark and the Cogden Yards and the food hall, there's a lot of really exciting things happening there. And so kind of building on that energy, I think is great.
I think with those things, another way of looking at it, even within the space themselves, is pulling out those things. I go back to things that Fred Kent and Project for Public Spaces have written about, are those 3 or 4 vital things to each space to make those work. And those are the same things on a local scale as a larger scale of being able to have that residential, the retail, the third place together, within those. So it's really kind of working and bringing those back. One thing just that I would advise you to kind of take a look at, and I can get it to you and send it to you. They're kind of linking the two areas. Was a project done for us by Land Design, which is kind of a little trail that loops around the railroad, kind of from where the String and Splinter is, kind of back down to the show place and then comes around. There are using that area on either side of the railroad. So I'll get that study to you, which I think makes a lot of sense. And railroads, as you've probably seen there, like Gastonia and other cities have a way of splitting towns. And for us, it becomes a real barrier. And how do we get that split across?
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions for 505?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, Jerron Hollis here, Communications, Public Engagement.
Go ahead, Jerron, you recognize.
Yeah, if Kevin, if you could go back to that early slide talking about process.
Yes. Oh, here, take a shortcut.
Yeah, thank you. When Tom and I and some of you sat down, we talked about all the moving parts in different phases of a campaign. And I think what's been great that we've been able to visualize is once the underpinning is sort of set in place, all of the different things that you can do. And there were so many great examples of some of the projects that you've done in different parts of the country. I think for the purposes of what we're doing here, I think it's important for us to back out and go back to this slide. I think we're getting into some good conversations about what things would look like once we've decided and gotten through some of these steps in the process. But I think it's important for the purposes of what we're doing here for this group that we start at the beginning. And I think it's important to kind of focus in from where we are now to look at the steps that you've kind of observed in that process. And I think with the other people that we have at the table, some of the partners in our community, I think we should and I think we can use this strategic process to get us to a point where we're talking about some of the tangible things of what this will look like. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to look at the process and stress the process. I think this is the first time, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chair, this is the first time we've had a 1, 2, 3, 4 process in front of us throughout these several discussions. So I think this is a good starting point. And I think one of the most beneficial parts of the presentation is talking about how you got to the places that you showed us in those examples. So could you talk a little bit more about the process specifically with these steps and how that was key in you finally arriving at some of those finished parts that you showed us in some of the subsequent slides?
Sure, I'll start, and certainly I think the others will want to chime in. This process, we followed these guidelines, whether, and I think I may have mentioned this earlier, whether it's a branding or graphic design process or architectural or interiors. I mean, the same fundamental approach applies. Sometimes, we might word it a little bit differently, but it's still all the same. And still all very important, obviously listening and observing. I know that there's, some folks that may come in and want to like drive an idea because they think it's a cool idea and they want to use it. That's not the best approach. It's always you got to tailor it specifically to the task and the need at hand. So that's under listen and observe, but probably one of the most important things for us is the creative brief, and really getting a good narrative and guiding principles to really help craft the end product, whether it's a logo or signage or architecture. If you have that foundation and that framework that you can build upon, it just makes it so much more rich. And it's a way that we like to check ourselves. So if we're designing something, we're going to be like, okay, no, wait, this is a nice idea, but does it really fulfill the brand promise and the narrative that we set out in the very beginning of this? And we do that all the time to, just make sure that we're staying on track. And the rest of the team and our collaborative partners are as well. So it's always something that we share up front when we do some work. And we want to make sure that everyone's on board and singing the same song.
Excuse me, Kevin, one second. For the process, I don't know if it's at step 1 or 2, we'd had some previous discussion about involvement. We talked about things like getting the pulse of the community and surveys and those kinds of things. Can you talk about which one of these steps that community dialogue, where that comes in, or where that has come in for you historically as you've been putting these together?
I think that pretty much comes under listening and observing, getting all the feedback and points of people's opinions up front, and we kind of take that info and digest it and compact it into a brief of project understanding.
I think it also too, depending on the type of project, it also comes back into play after like the vision and ideation before you do implementation. So you get another chance to reach out to the public and get their input, so they know they feel like they're part of the process. Like it's really important to make the people involved feel like it's their project, it's their story, it's something that they feel good about and believe in. And so it's definitely getting whoever's on board early, first by listening, observing, and then also kind of sharing with them through the process, kind of showing them how the process develops a bit more, definitely earns a little bit more trust in the development of a project.
That's a good point, Taylor.
Those are excellent points. Yeah, I look at this and I see what's, in my mind is called the Deming wheel: plan, do, check, act. You're all familiar with that. And so I think very much we're in the listening and observe phase, or the planning phase. And I think the next step for us will be deciding how we move into step 2, creative brief and process. I know recently, and I see Eric Omedo in the back, that we had some surveys that were sent out to the city to select individuals to kind of to capture some data on kind of the current state of how the city is viewed throughout that. And we had some past data. So when those surveys come back, I think that'll very much be a part of how we move forward into step number 2, to that creative brief and process. So look forward to getting that data back. We want to make sure that we capture the voice of all of the communities in our city to kind of craft that cohesive message to know what our brand is before we can make any changes or improvements. 505 Design, do you guys have any thing that you would like to add, or any other questions for 505 today?
Hi, this is Monica Peters. I just want to say that y'all have done an excellent, excellent job. I love all the different projects that you've done and what you're bringing to the table.
Oh, thank you, Monica.
Great, thank you.
Well,
I'm sorry, Chairman Holmes, I have a question for 505.
Yes.
In a process that you all engaged with Kannapolis or like Fort Mill, what was the timeline? How long did it take you to go through those 4 points and bring a product to fruition?
That really varies on every single project, but I can speak to the town of Fort Mill. It was about a 6-month process till we got to the final logo deliverable. from start to finish. We had several rounds of meetings. And for the most part, it went pretty smoothly, but, there were lots of meetings and then, kind of sitting on it and waiting for a little bit, but it was a solid 6 months. And then we delivered the logo. And then I think it was probably about 2 months or so after we delivered that they kind of launched it and, kind of introduced it to the community and started to make that transition, switching out their old logo with the new on the city vehicles and other applications. The water tower was just done last April, putting the logo on that.
As for Kannapolis, it's probably a 3 to 4 year process when you look at the start of developing the street or the master plan, so we kind of got brought into the process a little bit later. Again, that was the project we worked with Land Design on, and they were invested really early in developing the master plan. And then we were brought on once the kind of master plan was, I would say like 50% developed or getting further developed, to look at the architecture for the street facades, to look at the furnishings and the trellises, just the whole kind of walkability of it. And depending on other projects, we do the signage with them or have a little bit of a stronger role. And then, so yeah, I would say for Kannapolis, probably 3 to 4 years all in.
All right. Well, we've got a lot to think about and some great examples of how to proceed. So once again, this is Michael Holmes, Chairman Holmes. I would like to thank 505 Designs for their presentation today. And if there are no other questions or comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Ray Gibbs.
All right, we have a motion by Ray Gibbs. Do we have a second?
Jerron, I will second.
Second.
We have a second by Tom Conley. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? If there are no opposed? All right, then we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank
Very
you.
much.